How's it going, folks? Happy Monday. You guys hear me okay? All right, welcome back. And we should have a pretty easy lab today. Hope you guys had a great Halloween. And you guys, as a reminder, we have our second lab exam coming up next week, Monday. Right? Next week, Monday is the day of our second lab exam. And hopefully all of you know what we're going to be covering on that lab exam. Can anybody tell me what we'll be covering in the second lab exam? Don't get me stressed out. You know this. So what's going to be on the next lab is
Special senses through the cardio, as well as
this
the brain, like central nervous system and stuff.
is the nervous system, eyes, ears, and the heart. Okay, nervous system, eyes, ears, and the heart. And we cover everything already. So the only thing that is left is the heart, and we're going to be covering the heart today. Okay? So let me share my screen with you. And the folks that are in the lecture, we already went over this, so it's going to be a review, which is never a bad thing to do. You should review things again and again. So we're going to talk about the anatomy of the heart again. We're going to take a look at all the different structures of the heart that I will ask you questions about it in the exam. There will be several questions in the exam coming from the lab today. Then I want to talk about the coronary circulation. And again, this is something that you do need to know for the lab exam. I will ask questions about this. And then I want to talk a little bit about the physiology. I'm going to talk about the heart sound and talk about the ECG or EKG. Okay. The only lab activity that we have for today is to watch a video on Edpuzzle, and the video is going to walk you through a model of the human heart. Okay. Remember, I use pictures of models for the exam. So where is our heart? Well, we all know that the heart is located within the thoracic cavity. To be more specific, the heart is in between ribs number 2 and number 5, and 2/3 of the heart is positioned on the left side of the thoracic cavity. Okay? But it is not true to say that the heart is completely on the left-hand side, because we can see here about 1/3 of the heart is actually on the right side of the chest. The heart is located within an area of the thoracic cavity we call the mediastinum. Now, just to be clear, the mediastinum is not a membrane, it is not a tissue. The mediastinum is the name of the location within the thoracic cavity where we find our heart. Okay? Now, we can see that the heart is positioned right on top of the diaphragm. And we can also tell that the heart has a triangular shape to it. And this is an anterior view of the heart. Now, just like any triangle, we're going to find the base of the triangle and we're going to find the apex of the triangle. The apex of the heart is pointing towards the left side of the chest. Okay? While the base of the heart is pointing towards the right side of the chest. Why does this matter? Guys, we need to be able to split the heart into two halves because several of the structures of the heart are bilateral. And you know what that means by now. We are more than halfway through the semester. You know what bilateral means. Okay? Now, how do we split the heart in the middle? What we do is that we're going to pass an imaginary line that is going to go from the base of the heart, and then it's going to pass through the interventricular septum, also called the interventricular wall, and then it's going to come out through the apex. So this entire section of the heart right here, this is the left side of the heart. this side of the heart right here, this is going to be the right side of the heart. If you can't do this on the exam, you will miss a lot of points because, again, you need to be able to determine right from left. Okay? Now, just taking a look at the nice cartoonish representation of the heart right here. You can see some of the coronary blood vessels, which we're going to talk more about it in a minute. But if I come in here and I split this heart open, what are we going to see is that our heart has four different chambers, okay, which are spaces within the heart in which the blood is going to circulate. Now, before we name the chambers, let's split the heart in half. And again, how do we do that? An imaginary line from the base of the heart through the interventricular wall coming out through the apex. Okay? So now we have the left side of the heart and we have the right side of the heart. Okay, so now we can name the chambers. And we're going to have two atria. We have right atrium, left atrium, and we're also going to have two ventricles. We have a right ventricle and we have a left ventricle. You need to be able to identify the chambers of it. Will be on the exam. Okay? Now, attached to the chambers, specifically here to the right atria, to the right and left atrium, we are going to find what we call the great vessels of the heart. What are these great vessels of the heart? The great vessels of the heart, and we talked about them in the previous lab, these are major blood vessels, very thick blood vessels that bring blood in and take blood out of the heart directly, okay? Bring it in and take it. Looking at the right atrium, and the function of the right atrium is that it will receive all the deoxygenated blood in our body. The deoxygenated blood coming from the neck and the head region is going to arrive into the right atrium through what we call the superior vena cava. Now, the deoxygenated blood from the rest of the body will arrive at the right atrium, arriving at what we call the inferior vena cava. Both of them are major great vessels of the heart. Now, from the right atrium, this deoxygenated blood is going to be squeezed into the right ventricle. It's going to pass through a valve right here. We're going to talk more about them later. And then from the right ventricle, and now the blood is going to pass through another valve and enter what we call the pulmonary trunk right here. And this pulmonary trunk is another major blood vessel of the heart. Okay? Now, this pulmonary trunk will split into two branches. One branch going towards the right, the other one going towards the left. And they're going to take blood away from the heart and send this blood to the lungs in order to become oxygenated again. And these blood vessels are what we call the pulmonary arteries. And we have two of them. We have the left pulmonary artery and we have the right pulmonary artery. Okay? They are bilateral. And again, what they're going to do, they're going to take this blood to the lung. And now in the lungs, the blood is going to become oxygenated. And this blood is going to return to the heart. And it's going to return to the heart through what we call the pulmonary veins. And this is the difference between a vein and an artery. Arteries take blood away from the heart. Veins bring blood back to the heart. Okay? And the pulmonary veins will also be bilateral. So we have the left pulmonary vein and we have the right pulmonary vein. And they are going to bring now oxygenated blood into the left atrium. From the left atrium, the blood is going to go into the left ventricle. And then from the left ventricle, now the blood is going to enter what we call the ascending aorta. And this ascending aorta is the section of the aorta in which the blood is moving upwards. And I need to do this, make this warning again. You need to be specific when labeling the aorta. It is not enough just to say aorta. You need to tell me if I'm pointing to the ascending aorta, if I'm pointing to the aortic arch, or if I'm pointing to the descending aorta. Right? And again, these are the great vessels of the heart. And you need to know every single one of the structures that I just talked about right now. Any questions? If we take a slice of the heart wall, we're going to see that our heart is divided into three different layers that makes up the heart. We have an inner layer, a middle layer, and an outer layer. The innermost layer is what we call the endocardium. So the endocardium is the inner layer that is actually covering the chambers of the heart, the walls of the chambers of the heart, the atria and the ventricles. Then in the middle, we're going to find the thick layer of cardiac muscle, and we call this layer the myocardium. Myo means muscle. And then on the outside, we're going to find the epicardium. Okay? Now, this epicardium is also what we call the visceral pericardium. It means the same thing. Because remember, we talked about the fact that the heart is covered by a double layered membrane called the pericardial membrane. And this pericardial membrane has two layers, one that is touching the organ, the viscera, that we call the visceral layer, and one on the outside that we call the parietal layer. So the epicardium, also called the visceral pericardium, as we can look right here on the screen, folks, we can see how it folds on itself, and then it becomes what we call the parietal pericardium. Okay? In the middle, we're going to have a cavity called the pericardial cavity, and this cavity is filled with a fluid called the pericardial fluid. We have several circulation of blood in our body. We oftentimes only think about one circulation, but it's not. We have several of them, and we have some special ones as well. Some of the major ones include what we call the systemic circulation and the pulmonary circulation. The systemic circulation is the circulation of blood between the heart and the entire body. The pulmonary circulation is the circulation of blood between the heart and the lungs. Now, we're going to see here that in the systemic circulation, the arteries are carrying oxygenated blood. And this is why they are labeled in red. While the veins in the systemic circulation are carrying deoxygenated blood, and therefore they're going to be labeled in blue. So in the pulmonary circulation, is going to be the opposite. Because in the pulmonary circulation, the arteries are carrying deoxygenated blood, and the veins are carrying oxygenated blood. Therefore, the arteries are going to be blue, and the veins are going to be red. Now, we also have what is called the coronary circulation. What is the coronary circulation? The coronary circulation is the circulation of blood to the heart walls itself, feeding the cardiac cells with oxygen and with nutrients and removing the waste and the CO2. And there are 6 coronary arteries and 3 coronary veins. I will ask you questions about it in the exam. I can't be more explicit than that, unless I tell you what the question is. Then you're going to be asking too much. But again, you need to know this coronary circulation, folks, the 6 coronary arteries and the 3 coronary veins. So let's look at the coronary arteries first and name them, and then we're going to take a look at the coronary veins. Okay? Before naming those blood vessels, I want to split the heart into 2 halves. How I'm going to do that? Just like that. Okay, so now I have the right side of the heart and the left side of the heart. And if you guys take a look at the ascending aorta right here, you can notice that there are two blood vessels that are literally siphoning blood from the ascending aorta. On the right hand side, we have the right coronary. On the left hand side, we have the left coronary. Now, this right coronary, if you follow it right here, as it gets to this point right there, folks, it's going to split, and then it goes further down, and it's going to split again. Now, let's focus on this second split right here, the second branching off of the right coronary. And the right coronary is going to split into what we call the marginal branch. And the marginal branch is coming on the right hand side in the front of the heart. And we have the posterior interventricular branch, which is going to come all the way in the back of the heart. Okay, so again, we have a marginal branch and we have the posterior interventricular. Now, what about the left coronary? When the left coronary gets to this point right here, it is going to split again into two branches, one going towards the front, the other one going towards the back. The one in the front is what we call the anterior interventricular branch. The one in the back is what we call the circumflex branch. Okay? And these are the 6 coronary arteries you guys need to know for the exam. Right coronary, marginal branch, posterior interventricular branch. Left coronary, anterior interventricular branch, and circumflex. Okay? Now, what's the coronary veins? There are 3 coronary veins you guys need to know. Only 3. Now, does that mean these are the only coronary arteries and veins that we have? No, there are many more than that, but these are the ones I want you guys to focus for our course. And for the coronary veins, I want you guys to know the great cardiac vein, which is right in the front of the heart, and it runs right next to the anterior interventricular branch. Then going towards the back side of the heart, we're going to find the coronary sinus. And then the coronary sinus is going to branch off into another blood vessel, another vein that go towards the apex of the heart. And that's what we call the middle cardiac. And this middle cardiac vein runs right next to the posterior interventricular. Okay, so let's put all of these blood vessels together and take a look here in this cartoon of the heart and understand them a little bit better. And here we have both in an anterior view as well as a posterior view of the heart. Okay, so let's start with the coronary arteries first. So we have the right coronary artery, we have the marginal branch, and we have the posterior interventricular artery in the back. Then we have left coronary artery, anterior interventricular artery, and circumflex artery going towards the back. And now taking a look at the veins, we're going to find the great cardiac vein, and we can see how the great cardiac vein runs right next to the anterior interventricular branch. We have the middle cardiac vein, and we can see how the middle cardiac vein runs right next to the posterior interventricular branch. And we have the coronary sinus, which is the vein that goes towards the back side of. These are the only ones that you need to know for this. Any questions? So we talked about the chambers of the heart. We talked about the great vessels of the heart, and we talked about the coronary circulation, the coronary blood vessels, the coronary artery, and the coronary veins. Let's move on and talk about the heart valves. And just like the chambers, we're also going to have four different heart valves. And I will ask you questions about it in our exam next week, Monday. Okay? Before we name the heart valves, let's split the heart into two halves. Again, passing that imaginary line from the base through the interventricular septum, coming out through the apex. And here we have left side of the heart and right side of it. Now, for the heart valves, we have two different types. We have the atrioventricular valves, the AV valves, and we have what we call the SL valves, the semilunar valves. Okay? For the AV valves, we have the right AV, and the right AV separates the right atrium from the right ventricle. And we have the left AV, separating the left atrium from the left ventricle. Now, everybody look up here, please. We can see how the right AV has another name. It's also called the tricuspid valve, while the left AV has two other names, also called bicuspid or called mitral. I have a warning for you. On the lab exam, do not write all the names jumbled together. No. Pick one name for each. You're either going to say right AV or you're going to say tricuspid. It is not the right AV tricuspid valve. Either you say left AV or bicuspid or mitral. It is not the left AV bicuspid mitral valve. Just pick a name. Pick a name. Now, for the AV valves, we have a little strings that is going to attach the AV valves to the inner walls of the ventricles. And these little strings are what we call the chordae tendineae. Again, what does it do? It's going to attach the valves to the ventricular walls, and it's going to help with the opening and closing of the valves. We don't have chordae tendineae for the SL valves, only the AV valves. Okay? And yes, they are bilateral. Guys, if on the day of the exam I'm pointing to these strings right here, these are the left chordae tendineae. If I'm pointing to these ones right here, these are the right chordae tendineae. And the chordae tendineae are anchored inside of the ventricles by tiny little muscle called the papillary muscles. And these are also bilateral. We have the left papillary muscles and we have the right papillary muscles. Any questions, folks? Okay. PSL valves. We don't have a right and left SL. We have the aortic SL and we have the pulmonary SL. Okay? The pulmonary SL is the valve that is going to separate the right ventricle from the pulmonary trunk up here. Hence the name pulmonary valve. And the aortic SL is the valve that is going to separate the left ventricle from the ascending aorta. Hence the name aortic SL. Any questions on how you need to answer these questions in this? Moving on, this is pretty much all that you guys need to know in terms of the anatomy of the heart. That's what you need to know for this end. Okay? Now let me talk a little bit about the physiology of the heart, how the heart works. We all know that the heart can beat on its own. It can contract on its own. It does not need any information from the brain. And the reason for that is because inside of the heart, inside the right atrium of the heart, we have two clusters of very special cells called the natural pacemaker cells. Those two clusters are the SA node, the sinoatrial node, and the AV node, the atrioventricular node. Don't confuse the atrioventricular node with the atrioventricular valve. Two different things. Now, what does the natural pacemaker cells do? The natural pacemaker cells within the sinoatrial node, folks, they can generate their own action potential. They don't need any stimuli to generate the action potential. And the action potential is going to spread from the SA node towards the left atrium and also towards the bottom of the right atrium. And this is what we're seeing right here with this arrow. The arrow is showing the distribution, the spread of the action potential. Now, what's going to happen with the atria as the action potential is spreading through the atrial cells? The atria is going to contract, pushing the blood, both of them, right and left, at the same time, pushing the blood into the ventricles, the right and the left ventricle. Okay? Now, when the action potential here go towards the AV node, now what the AV node is going to do is that it's going to take that signal and it's going to send the signal through different nerves that are innervated inside the ventricular walls. And this nerve has different names, different sections has different names. The first section is what we call the bundle of His. This is a nerve inside the interventricular septum. Then this bundle of His is going to split into two branches called the bundle branches. So we have the left bundle branch and we have the right bundle branch. And this bundle branch, they're going to go all the way towards the apex of the heart, and now they're going to innervate the outer walls of the ventricle. And now we call this the Purkinje fibers. Okay, so we have the left Purkinje fibers and we have the right Purkinje fibers. Now, what is an ECG? An ECG, as we're going to talk about it in a little bit, it is the composite information that we gather from all the electrical impulses that are running through. And as I said, those electrical impulses, what they're going to do is that they're going to lead to the contraction of the cardiac muscles. And the contraction of the cardiac muscle is going to push the blood through the valves, heart valves, the AV valves, and then the SL valves. And guys, it is the closing of those valves that leads to what we call our heart sound. Right? The heart sound has that very peculiar sound to it, what we call the lub-dub sound. The lub sound, also called the S1, this is due to the closing of the AV valves, both of them right and left at the same time. The dub sound, which is shorter and more faint, this is due to the closing of the SL valves and is also called the S2 heart sound. Okay? So our heart sound sounds like this. We have due to the closing of those heart valves, right? So let's take a closer look at the ECG. And the ECG, also called an EKG, electrocardiogram, is going to give an indication of the cardiac cycle. It's going to give a doctor an indication of how well our heart is working. All right? And what we're going to measure here with the ECG, we're not going to measure cardiac contraction per se. We're going to measure the electrical impulse that is running through the cardiac cells. And we're going to get this graph right here representing a single heartbeat. Okay? Now we can see that we have all these different waves right here. The first wave in the ECG graph, is what I call the P wave. And this P wave represents the depolarization of the atrial cells. What do we mean by depolarization? Depolarization is when the ion channels in the cell open up and sodium enters the cells. And we know when sodium enters the cell, we're going to have a generation of an action potential. So this is what the P here is representing, the depolarization of the atria, both of them right and left. Now, what happens immediately after depolarization of the atria? We're going to have contraction of the atria. Okay, because contraction comes after depolarization. First, the cell depolarizes, then the cell contracts. Okay? Then we're going to see another big wave right here, which is called the R wave. And the R wave is part of the QRS complex. And the R wave represents the depolarization of the ventricles. And what's going to happen after we have a ventricular depolarization? We're going to have ventricular contraction. The ventricles now will contract. And then finally, we have another wave here called the T wave. And the T wave represents ventricular repolarization. What does repolarization mean? Repolarization is when the cells, the sodium channels of the cell close, the potassium channels open, and the cell go back to the resting membrane potential. So the cell now can relax. So after ventricular repolarization, we're going to have ventricular relaxation. Now we can see here that we don't find a atrial repolarization. And we don't see atrial repolarization, even though it does happen, and we can see it right here on the cartoon. We don't see it in the ECG because atrial repolarization happens at the same time as the QRS complex. And the QRS complex is a stronger signal, and it hides the signal for atrial repolarization. Okay, but it does happen. Otherwise, the atrial could not relax. It needs to repolarize first, then relax. Any questions? No? So let's watch again a little video here, a little animation, very nice little animation that shows what's happening with the heart and the cardiac cycle.
Between Molly leaving and Mom's osteoporosis, I thought life was going to slow down. Boy, was I wrong.
The cardiac conduction system consists of the following components. The sinoatrial node, or SA node, located in the right atrium near the entrance of the superior vena cava. This is the natural pacemaker of the heart. It initiates all heartbeat and determines heart rate. Electrical impulses from the SA node spread throughout both atria and stimulate them to contract. The atrioventricular node, or AV node, located on the other side of the right atrium, near the AV valve. The AV node serves as electrical gateway to the ventricles. It delays the passage of electrical impulses to the ventricles. This delay is to ensure that the atria have ejected all the blood into the ventricles before the ventricles contract. The AV node receives signals from the SA node and passes them onto the atrioventricular bundle, AV bundle, or bundle of His. This bundle is then divided into right and left bundle branches, which conduct the impulses toward the apex of the heart. The signals are then passed onto Purkinje fibers, turning upward and spreading throughout the ventricular myocardium. Electrical activities of the heart can be recorded in the form of electrocardiogram, ECG, or EKG. An ECG is a composite recording of all the action potentials produced by the nodes and the cells of the myocardium. Each wave or segment of the ECG corresponds to a certain event of the cardiac electrical cycle. When the atria are full of blood, the SA node fires, electrical signals spread throughout the atria and cause them to depolarize. This is represented by the P wave on the ECG. Atrial contraction, or atrial systole, starts about 100 milliseconds after the P wave begins. The PQ segment represents the time the signals travel from the SA node to the AV node. The QRS complex marks the firing of the AV node and represents ventricular depolarization. Q wave corresponds to depolarization of the interventricular septum. R wave is produced by depolarization of the main mass of the ventricles. S wave represents the last phase of ventricular depolarization at the base of the heart. Atrial repolarization also occurs during this time, but the signal is obscured by the large QRS complex. The ST segment reflects the plateau in the myocardial action potential. This is when the ventricles contract and pump blood. The T wave represents ventricular repolarization immediately before ventricular relaxation, or ventricular diastole. The cycle repeats itself with every heartbeat.
Is any questions? All right, so what we're doing today, again, we only have one in-lab activity for today, which is the add puzzle video. And of course, after you're done with the video, then you're gonna jump on Lamaku and take. When you're done with that, you're good to go. And hopefully you guys are preparing yourselves for the next lab exam. I know that a lot of people need to do a little bit better than we did on the previous exam. So let's get started.